clear of the closing doors, please.
All right, here we go. Subway Sports Talk. My name is Peter Kennedy, and I am your host. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning into SST on Apple Podcasts app and Spotify. Also, you can watch it on Spotify. You can watch it on YouTube. Check us out on social at Subway Sports Talk. And joining me today, 3 years in the making. Not one, not two, but 3 years in the making. Two basketball minds ready to talk NCAA tournament. I'm going to start with Coach Pete Tutrone. Coach, what's up? Happy to have you on. We've been talking about doing this pod for a long time.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Many times see you walking through the gym. I said, I'm ready to talk. I'm ready to talk. Thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
Of
Good
course.
to be
And
here.
on the other side here, we got assistant coach. Because that's how this dynamic really works. If we're being honest here, we got head coach Pete. We got assistant coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, Joe Ackrey.
That's for Pete to decide.
He's the brains. He's the brains behind the outfit. I'm the mouth. He's the brains. I'm the mouth.
And Joe Ackrey, welcome to the podcast, my guy. I know that Thursday is like a national holiday for you. The first day, the first real day of the tournament. It's like a national holiday. I've seen you in action on those days. It's a sight to be seen. You know, the paper's flying. You're ready to roll. You got multiple screens going, and it's like you're a kid in a candy store.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the nose. I mean, I've been excited, even just getting into work today. It's just unbelievable to think that we're at this time of the year, and it's exciting. It's what you look forward to, and this is why you kind of watch college basketball and embrace it.
And now, what's more exciting to you, Ackrey? Is it the actual games itself, or just like staring at your bracket, just like visualizing what you're going to see?
I'm not, the brackets. Yeah, I dabble with the brackets, but I'm not a guy who needs to go out there and have a perfect bracket or win a. It's nice to win the pools when you enter them and whatnot, but it's more about watching the games 100%. We coach basketball. You mentioned that. We've had the last couple of weeks off, and it's nice. I hate to say it, but I know Pete probably agrees with me. Like to be able to kind of relax, not worrying about practice and sit on the couch and watch a couple games and kind of learn more about these teams and these programs and learn from them as a coach too. So,
well, that's part of the reason why I'm so happy to have you guys here. Not just because you are basketball coaches who think about the game at a different level, but you also watch college basketball like all year long, which is important because someone like me, I'm not going to sit up here and pretend that like I know about the third starter on McNeese State and that's why I'm going to pick them. I'm going to pick them because they're a low seed that feels juicy and I want to get in on that action, right? Like I'm not coming in with that breadth of knowledge. I'm also not coming in with the understanding of the styles and how much they could impact the matchups, right? Because it's different from the NBA where it does really feel like all the stats are in this similar enough vacuum. When you look in college basketball, you can have a lower conference level team where their stats might be incredible, but is their competition the same, right? So you have to start weighing into that. So that's why I'm so pumped to have you guys here. And I also know, Pete, like you watch NBA too, right? You watch both. Ackrey, obviously, not saying you don't. I know you do as well, but I'm starting with you, Pete.
Yeah.
What is it for college basketball and the tournament specifically that draws you to be kind of tapped into the tournament, and not even the tournament, but to college basketball overall from the get-go all the way through this time?
So I just love the whole aspect of it. I mean, one of the best things that ever happened in my household was getting Disney Plus, which came with ESPN Plus, right? And I'm watching mid-majors and I'm watching any and every game as often as possible. In terms of what I love about it, when it comes to tournament time is I love the finality of it. One and done, one game and it's over. I love that aspect. Listen, there was a time when NBA playoff series were much shorter and it had a little bit more of a feel to that. Just don't feel that anymore. As long as these series are, I feel like there's always tomorrow. There's always another day. There's always another game. In the tournament play and in conference tournament play, that's it. You leave it all out there. You have a bad shooting night or you're not rebounding well. That's it. That you're held to a higher standard in a shorter amount of time. And that's what I really enjoy about it.
Yeah, that's that stuff that it makes those magic moments, right? You hear, shout out to Titus with the One Shining podcast, but that's the thing, right? One shining moment. It's all kind
Yeah,
of about that finality
yeah,
that you mentioned there, which makes it so damn exciting. And obviously the game has changed too. It's not quite the same as the NBA. And I know, there's a lot of college basketball fans who think the NBA is trash. A lot of NBA fans who don't like how college basketball is played. At the end of the day, there's room in this world for both of them, and they have their
absolutely.
strengths and weaknesses kind of on both sides, where you have that
Right.
energy and passion that just like seeps through your television screen on the college level. Maybe you have that athleticism and shot making on the NBA that doesn't always seep through on the college level. So, Acri, for
Well,
you, go ahead, Pete.
no, I also was just going to say, like, there's a certain aspect even to the women's game where if you talk about them too, like they're playing 4 quarters,
Mm.
they're advancing the ball. There's a lot of different strategies to their game too that you see, and it's like there's different aspects, like and there's different things to each level of that game, which I think is pretty cool this time of year that you get to see all the different uh, coaching styles and things that are done, even in the women's game to advance the ball. And then you see that in the NBA as well, different styles.
So, Acri, when you head into tournament season, right? You're going in, all the conference championships are taking place, whatever. You're waiting for Selection Sunday. What is kind of your approach now heading into this tournament when you start thinking about the seeding and who you think is going to make a run? Are you trying to pinpoint your favorites from the get-go? Are you trying to pinpoint underdogs? What is kind of like your idea of how to attack a bracket, if you will?
Yeah, yeah. Pete, I think that's a great question. And again, it kind of relays back to one of the points I made earlier, which is, and some people are this way, and I think I just align with it, like visual learning, right? So as much as I can kind of sit there and watch some games, like I'm not going to speak on the teams that I don't watch as much, because simply if I can't sit there and analyze their style of play. But it's funny too, because with all the conference tournaments going on, right? You watch these games, or you watch games prior to the conference tournaments, right? Like there's one team I definitely will be talking about, and my expectations of them going into their conference tournament, and then what they actually performed at, and it's two different sides of the spectrum, right? So I think you make an evaluation on a team, you watch them in conference play, and then even when these the seeding is decided, right? A team can come out, they could be seeded real high, and then they can come out real flat and get upset in round one, and your perspective on a team completely can change, right? From a visual standpoint. And I think it's about, for me at least, analyzing brackets and looking at teams. I think it's about thinking about different angles that they can come from. And I think this year specifically, that's really exciting because there are some teams that maybe at times looked not as great as they can be. And then at other times they look like they could be the team that can make it to the Final Four and make it to the Sweet 16. And I think, the committee did a pretty good job as far as some of those, I would say more on the 1 through 7 seeds in each bracket,
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's interesting for sure, but I'm definitely a visual guy, so I got to watch you play to kind of determine where I think you're at.
And it's a good point too, because like if you look at the stats only, right? If you're a big stats guy, which I look at the stats in a lot of things, but you'll see Duke at the top of every list and all the major analytics, but it doesn't matter if their best players hurt, right? So all that stuff matters. Iowa State's another one where one of their best players is hurt. They're top 10 in net rating for the year, but are they that same team? So all these things kind of come into play. Now, last question before we start talking about some of these teams, some of these matchups, we're obviously going to highlight underdogs. We're going to highlight those first round upsets, those deep run possibilities, and of course, get into our Final Four predictions and things of that nature. But Pete, on the front of style, is there one style you can point to that over time you feel like plays out the best in the tournament? Like whether it be a offensive style, the gritty defenses, the transitions, the shoot, like what stands out to you as a style that really takes charge during March?
I think you're really going to see, and I think you're really going to hear it over the course of the next couple of days and I think it's been talked about a lot lately, especially locally, is defense, and I think you're going to hear a lot about it with St. John's, and you have heard a lot about it about their defense right now. I think you're hearing a lot about that with Izzo and Michigan State. So I think the thing you're going to hear a lot about is who can defend. Duke is showing they can defend. St. John's is showing they can defend. Michigan State has shown they can defend. And I think that's going to be the big push and the big talked about topic over the next few days. Obviously, you're going to have Auburn and Florida, who are just offensive juggernauts as well. So you're going to have contrasting styles, but it seems like those top 10 seeds, top 8 seeds, it seems to be a little bit of a contrast of defense and offense. So I'm not really sure which one's going to win out. I know which one I hope wins out, but, because I'm an old school kind of guy, so I hope defense wins. I think my friend, my compadre next to me over here, he may have the team that has the offense and the defense clicking at the same time. So, I think Duke has a little bit of both, whereas all those other teams kind of have one of them they can hang their hat on right now.
So that's that. Your main thing is, are they going to defend? Like, are they going to play good enough defense? Like, a lot of people can score, but can you get stops? Seems like it's a big key for you. Acri, do you have what's your mindset on looking for a style that you like?
Yeah, I think Pete makes a great point. I think a little bit of college basketball, especially, UConn is in the tournament. Obviously, Hurley is an offensive wizard, and some of his stuff has been used by other coaches now, and you're starting to see a lot of this action from a lot of different teams. So one thing I do think that has helped some teams from the last couple tournaments is, how unique can we get offensively, right? To get our team in the best position to score. But on top of that, I don't want to just be the guy who says, it's the offensive side, but I also don't want to be someone who says it's offense and defense because, you're basically just saying you got to play good basketball. I think more importantly on the defensive side, the teams that are going to go deep are the teams that can really protect at the rim, at least from some of the brackets that I've done. And, I think the reason for that is because not many teams scheme defensively to worry about some of the perimeter play. And also in college, you do see more guys trying to get to the rim, right? And that's just, I think, like from a maturity standpoint, you have younger players or just not NBA ready players where they're not as comfortable to be perimeter scorers. So again, when you see some of these teams, right, if you're a team that can defend at the rim, I think that will help you tremendously throughout the tournament. And obviously, like I said, how creative can you get offensively? Because you saw it last year, right? I know UConn, they ran the table, they blew everybody out, but you watch their stuff, you watch what they run, and it's the creativity of their coaches and the execution of their players that also made that skill gap look so large. So again, I would love for it, like Pete said, to kind of be a defensive thing, but the sustainability on the defensive side too, right, is something that over a course of a tournament, are your athletes going to be prepared every night to be playing, full court like a team like St. John's, right? How sustainable is that? And I really, selfishly hope that St. John's can kind of do that on the defensive side and be sustainable. But we're going to have to see. And again, that's what you look forward to with the tournament.
Yeah, of course. And now, quickly on like the stat front idea, you look past the last 2 years and it's like, oh, are there any trends on the last winners from the last 2 seasons? Like, well, yeah, Connecticut was the best net rating last year and they won. They were the best net rating 2 years ago and they won. But is that an outlier? Probably, right? Obviously, they're seeing some of the difficulty now of trying to do it a third time in a row, but they're still in the dance and you never know what happens. And you got to see what that coach can bring out. Now, is there a time that before we start getting to talk about teams for real and really talk about this stuff, do we need to do an airing of the biases? Do we need to get this off the chest? I mean, I know Mr. Acri might have a couple biases out here, and he's not hiding it necessarily, right? So not only is this guy a St. John's alumni, congratulations, even though you don't care one lick about them right now, you are a pretty big Duke fan. So maybe that's a good place to start, Ac. Do you need to get any biases off your chest, or do you feel like you actually look at Duke as realistic as possible and leave your biases at the door?
Yeah, I think going into this, one thing I will say is just I think people watching know the talent level that Duke has. Obviously, they're a 1 seed. Not much to say. Obviously, as we get through the podcast, I might be able to provide a little bit more insight, being that I pretty much watch them every time that they're on the television.
Okay.
But yeah, is there bias when it comes to my brackets? Yeah, if you look at my brackets, you're going to see a lot more in favor of Duke. But I also think, their bracket in totality, and again, we'll get into that a little bit more, might be one of the more weaker brackets. So, there's going to be some bias, but I also think I do try to take things logically a little bit too. So I don't want anybody to think I'm just, Blue Devil Blue the whole way here. I will provide some insight on the other teams too.
I appreciate that. I think you'll keep it a buck. I do.
Try
Pete,
to be.
Pete, what about you? Do you have any biases that you need to air? I feel like you're pretty straightforward.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I am a St. John's alum as well.
Oh, shout out! I did not know that.
Yeah, I go pretty far back with the Johnnies, back to when they were the Red Men. When with the Mullen, Wennington, Walter Berry teams, Mark Jackson. But I will, and I cannot tell a lie. I've grown up as well, a Duke guy. I go back to Danny.
How did I get two of you on my podcast?
I mean, I'm not. I go back to Danny Ferry, Christian Leitner, Bobby Hurley, Grant Hill. I go back to those guys as well. I really love those teams. But I am. I just love watching the guy. I love watching Izzo. I love watching Michigan State.
Yeah.
It's like, grown up around him, kind of, love his philosophy, love his way, love his old school way about him. And I feel like as Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, these guys have now started to retire and go away. It kind of comforting seeing Izzo still on the sideline,
Yeah, no, it is. And it's good to see this situation here with the St. John's, which we obviously will get to St. John's. I mean, I was working the fan all weekend. We talked a lot of St. John's. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, God, I could imagine.
But you're looking at that bracket over there. And not only are you seeing St. John's, you're seeing the Bill Self, John Calipari, round 2 opponent. You're going to have Patino versus one of those guys in round 2. Oh, I mean, obviously, granted that, Patino and St. John's take care of business, which they obviously should. But you got them in it. You got a lot of big-name coaches still running the show over here. In that bracket, You also got Penny Hardaway up in the 5 seed up there, which is exciting. And, of course, Hurley as the 8 seed, hoping to get a chance at Florida in round number 2. I'm sure that's going to get some people excited when they're picking their brackets, especially up here in the Northeast. All right, I'm going to say this about myself. My only biases are kind of like, and I hate to say this because it sounds like I'm doing it because you guys are here. It's kind of like anti-Duke, but it's not really Duke. It's just like the establishment, right? A little anti-establishment when it comes to the tournament. But I also admit right here, I'm a casual. I'm a college basketball casual. I follow the college basketball through their NBA draft prospects. So that's where I could provide some more insight, even though 2 of the projected top 5 picks out of Rutgers did not make the tournament. Whatever, we'll talk about that in the offseason, I guess. So I don't have a bias particularly on one program. I do have 2 of my students heading to Florida. Well, one there already and one heading there that I think you guys know, and I'm very excited for those guys.
One was my student too, so.
One is your student as well.
One of my former students, so.
Yes, and shout out to him crushing it down there. But he's also extremely hyped up, drank all the Kool-Aid, and is killing it down there. So I have a little soft spot for them, but they're also in the same bracket as St. John's, and how am I not going to root for them a little bit as well? So with that all being said, let's get into some actual basketball talk, some actual breakdown of these brackets, of these regions, and let's dive right into it. So first things first is how we're going to do it. We're going to start at what I like to call the top left, which I think that's how all normal people should refer to it, but it's also known as the South region. I say top left because you look at your bracket, oh, which one is that? Yeah, top left. Got it. That's going to be the bracket that is led by Auburn and, of course, Michigan State, just mentioned with Tom Izzo at the 2. You got the Iowa States, you got Michigan, you got some possible underdog opportunities. So first and foremost, let's start off, Coach Pete, with you. And I want to ask you this question here. So I don't know how you do it when you're filling out your brackets. Obviously, everyone in their right mind picks the 1 seed. 99.9% of people pick their 2 seed. It starts getting tricky, though, especially in the past couple of years. From everywhere in between that, it's all tricky, right? So when you're going through a bracket, are you trying to pinpoint an underdog? Like, are you going into it looking for an underdog that you like in a certain bracket? Are you going game by game? And then if so, why don't you hit me off with one of your favorite matchups from that bracket?
Oh, okay. So when I'm doing it, obviously, like you said, I'm moving the 1 seed through. Like, I don't see it. Like, I don't feel that ever.
Right.
Like, I feel they should go through. I feel the 2 seed on a regular basis should go through. Then it's all by feel. It's all by matchups. I mean, I spend so much. My other problem is I spend so much time watching these mid-major and smaller conferences, and this one, that one, the Atlantic 10, and then my heart takes over a little bit, and then I start to I really get behind something. So, if I had to tell you somebody or some kind of matchups that I'm looking at here that I see could potentially lead to some upsets, I have 2 here. One of them is UC San Diego over Michigan, or potentially, and it's not really a true upset, it's a 7-10 game, but I could see New Mexico getting by Marquette. Those are the 2 I see there. So, and those are always the trendy. The 12-5 is always trendy. The 7-10, is that really an upset? I don't think that's an upset.
Yeah.
But on paper it is. Number wise, it is seed wise. But those are the 2 I look at mostly there for upset specials.
Yeah, and what I'll say too about UC Davis, I'm combining 2 schools here already. UC San Diego, they are only been Division I for what, 4 years or 5 years, and this is their first year that they're tournament eligible, and they're in the dance. They're going to be a popular one, I think, a little bit there, especially from what I've seen. All their metrics really check out super well, which makes them kind of exciting there. And then Michigan's a blue blood, right? Even though they've had their ups and downs on the basketball court, they are a blue blood, but they're also not been super trustworthy, this season in particular. So they're an interesting spot right there. Acri, do you have anything to add as far as like exciting matchups in that part of the bracket? And then we'll jump into some specific teams and why we might like them.
Yeah. I'll just touch on, Pete's point on Michigan and UC San Diego. I obviously get where he's coming from for sure. And I was like, talking about teams when you watch and making an opinion, like I was so anti-Michigan probably the last month, and I just think that watching them a little bit, they've started to pick up their pace a little bit. I think Dusty May, one thing about him is like when he, went deep in the tournament with FAU a couple of years ago, the team was playing at an incredible pace. And I think Michigan's starting to try to figure that out, with their 2 7-footers in, they have Danny Wolf and they got Golden, right? So that's my 2 cents where it comes to the Michigan a little bit. But my matchup that I really love, 8-9 game, Louisville-Creighton. Okay. Watched Creighton play last week in the Big East. I do think, the Kalkbrenner-Ashworth duo is dynamic, right? But, Ashworth to me is a little bit untrustworthy. He had a string of a couple bad games, at least even when watching him live in the Paul Creighton game. I watched the double OT game live. Like, just didn't do enough for me. As opposed to Louisville, kind of watched them all year, ACC. Pat Kelsey's doing a good job first year, and Terrence Edwards really making some strides. And I know they lost to Duke, obviously, in the ACC tournament, but they had a huge win over Clemson where I think they kind of exposed them a little bit. So that, to me, is the game that I'm going to watch. My eyes will be glued to the screen for that one. And again,
is that the first game of the day?
It might be
the first game of the tournament. I think that might be the first game of the tournament, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it is.
Yeah. So I'll be,
which makes it even more exciting. Because first game and you're locked in. Let's go.
Yeah. Just been thinking about that one a lot. And I honestly don't, I have Louisville right now in most of my brackets. Don't know if I'm on the right side. Again, like Creighton was a team that I loved in the beginning of the year, still loved, in the Big East tournament. Loved them last year, right? But just same thing with Louisville. Like I had a lot of positive outlook when watching them. So it'll be for sure that one's going to be a great game, at least in my mind. And if it is the first game, what a way to start March. I don't pay attention to times or anything like that. I just keep the TV rolling. So whatever's on is on.
Now, let me ask you one more question, then we'll dive into some of the teams we like to make some runs out of this bracket here. Every year you get at least one Ivy League school in there, and the Ivies had a way of making runs, getting it exciting. I think, 2 years ago, Princeton made a run. They seem to be an upset watch every single year. This year in particular, We're looking at Yale in the 13 spot. They're 7.5-point dogs, and I'm kind of just bringing up some of those spreads as kind of a gauge as to what the sports books are saying. Like, for example, that 5-12, Michigan's only a 2.5-point favorite over UC San Diego. Meanwhile, that 4-11, you got a 7.5-point spread on Yale. But does the Ivy League school excite you a little bit? Does that Yale matchup make you question yourself and say, hey, this is one of those spots. I'm picking the 13 and picking up some points in the pool?
Pete, I'll go to you. I'll let you open it up if you want. I didn't know if
No. So I watched Yale. They're definitely tremendously coached. Look, they're going to have to hit some timely shots. They're going to have their field goal percentage is going to have to be outstanding. And when you find that they're playing these bigger conference teams, it's real quick right out to shoot. Two things: can they defend, and will they be able to rebound with them? If they can rebound with them in those first few minutes, those first 10 minutes, and they're able to keep pace, then they're going to be fine. But like you said, in the past, the Princeton runs, the Cornell runs, those were the big things. Can they hit the timely shots? Can they be patient on offense? And most of all, can they rebound with these larger conference teams? So I think Yale will definitely have a shot at doing that. But again, we'll know within the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, I really agree with Pete there. You'll know early. I do think some of the SEC teams will have to run into some of these more defensive-minded teams or just more, culture-orientated or bought-in programs. But for this one, you have Wade Taylor on the other side for A&M, and he's just an absolute bucket. So it's going to be tough for Yale. They're going to have to come out and guard. To me, I don't know if that's the team. If A&M has to really worry about their first round matchup, but we'll see. Again, Ivies are going to be well coached. They're going to be disciplined. And I think that's what makes it always circles back to just why the tournament is so great, right? Why every matchup matters, right? And why the regular season of college basketball matters.
Now, for this, top left South region over here, we have Auburn at the top. They're the overall 1 seed. They've been a juggernaut all along this whole entire season. They've just been, a fantastic team, obviously, right? All the numbers check out. They're not the overall number 1, are they? Were they technically the
consensus number 1?
They are the all right. I thought I had that right.
Houston was Duke was 2, Houston was 3, and Florida was 4.
There you go. So with this bracket here, do you feel like it truly is like an Auburn's to lose situation here? Like they are the 1 seed that shouldn't have major problems. If they do have major problems, kind of where do you see them hitting those bumps? Ackery, go ahead if you want.
Yeah. I think so. Auburn, again, exciting to watch. Was able to watch a lot of them this year, but also at the same time, right, really caught the back end of their schedule. And I'm sure everybody's kind of saying the same thing, right? Like they lost 3 out of 4 at one point. Like they were, they're the consensus number 1. You got to remember Bruce Pearl, Janai Broom, right? At the end of the day, they have what it takes to win this whole thing. But what scares me when I watch them is when they were losing some of these games, right? They've become really one-dimensional offensively, where just from a coaching perspective or just watching, it's like, if you become one-dimensional late in games, it's really hard because if things don't go your way, what's the next plan, right? What are you guys going to do next as a team, right? And they have the tools and they have the weapons to kind of do a lot more than just kind of try to get Janai Broom post touches and then look for just defensive stops. And I think a lot of times in crunch time, that's what I was watching. And again, you're going to be in the tournament, and a lot of these games are going to be crunch time games, right? So how good can they be in crunch time? Again, I talked about creativity in the beginning of the podcast, right? If they can get a little bit more creative, right? Listen, I know I've said his name 3 times. He's going to be the player of the year, probably, Janai Broom. But, there are other pieces on that team that can really help them too. And again, they play with a lot of energy. They play with a lot of passion. But they have to make sure that they can do a lot of different things at the end of games. That's where I'm at with them.
Pete, what's your read on Auburn?
I don't know. They're the second most, to me, fragile number 1 seed out there.
Mm.
I'm not sold on Florida. I mean, I'm sure we'll get to that later.
Oh yeah.
But I feel like they're the second most fragile number one. I feel like they could get picked off. I feel like they could get picked off in that second round. I feel like that Louisville Creighton winner could be a handful for them. But I ideally feel like this could be Michigan State's region. I really do. I really feel like there's something going on with Izzo this year. I can't put my hands on it. I don't know what it is, but it's there. It's there, and it's brewing. With that being said, he could be knocked out by before Saturday morning. So I've been wrong before, but I feel something brewing in my gut with him this year.
Now, quickly on the odds here, Auburn is the favorite to win the South region. Michigan, so they're minus 135. Michigan State's plus 500, and then you get Iowa State plus 750, and then a major jump down to Texas A&M, Michigan, and Ole Miss and Louisville, all the way down plus 1,600, all the way to plus 2,200. Obviously, you go even further deep. For example, some of those lower seeds in there, you got like Yale is plus 15,000. Right, UC San Diego plus 7,000. So obviously the odds are going to be, very difficult if you're going for some of those other teams. So Acri, Pete kind of just showed his hand there that he's not a huge fan of Auburn making it out of this region. Is there a dark horse for you? Is there another team that you would like, maybe besides Michigan State? You could say Michigan State as well, or you could just say Auburn's going to win it. It's up to you. But who do you like to actually make the run here out of the South?
I'm real happy. Circled back. So I did bring up Michigan and my complete change of heart on them. So rather than Michigan State, one of my brackets that I kind of really keyed in on, I did have Michigan taking down Auburn and then playing Michigan State and getting a little rematch from about a month ago when Michigan State absolutely blew the doors off of them and made it look like Dusty May had no idea how to coach. Izzo made Dusty May look like he didn't know how to coach. And just, again, I think you just think about the tournament. I have so much respect for Tom Izzo, and this is just, we're speaking in hypotheticals here. But then you have to think about some of the magic. And again, it's just started connecting a little bit with me, with Michigan, just that they have some of the tools to do it. So they're my dark horse, I guess, out of the South, at the 5 seed. I'm sure, they're not a favorite by any means, but we'll see how it plays out, right? I think you made a great point. Auburn's going to have to play Louisville or Creighton. Again, I spoke on Creighton. I spoke on that game, and I think there are some guys who can really give Auburn a problem on either side, right? Kalkbrenner's a 7'2", freak of nature, not really freak of nature athletically, but can do a little bit inside, can do a lot of it inside, can do a little bit outside, and can defend the rim like hell. So if they come out and they play Auburn, it's a tough game. It's a tough game. So, but yeah, Michigan is my team that I think can sneak in there. They hit a little bit of a stride, in the conference tournament, and it's interesting. I was much higher on them. Like I said, a month and a half ago, was completely anti-Michigan, and now I just saw something and started to think a little bit about their team and their roster, and back on their wave a little bit.
Very good. So I think this is a good time as we're going to move to the next bracket here. I want to ask you guys this question. As you're filling out your brackets, as you're thinking about your Final Four, are you thinking at all about the balance of who you're going to end up having? I know, Pete, you sent in our little group chat today the joke about, Jalen Williams. Jay Williams having 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 in his bracket. Do you think about that? Does it ever
absolutely
it sways you away from having all the the top seeds and things like that? You're saying, well, if I have Auburn here, then I got to knock out a different 1 seed. How much goes into it with that?
Listen, I teach math. I deal with numbers. The probability of that happening, of those ones just all getting there, right? It's wild. I mean, it's astronomical. And when I do it and I see it, and listen, I've been watching this tournament since I'm a kid, and I've never seen brackets just fall so perfectly. So when I do fill it out and I sit there and I go, okay, wait, I got 4 number ones all getting to the Final Four. to me, that's improbable. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, but in theory, those are great teams. Like right now, when you're looking at a clean bracket, you're like, yeah, but those 4 teams are so good, and they've been so good for so many months. Like, and then then somebody comes along, a George Mason, a VCU in years past that just come to the party, and that's something else that happens along the way. So yeah, so when I am filling out a bracket, I do tend to stop myself. I before I get to that Jay Williams, moment where I'm like, oh, this is complete chalk. I personally won't let myself do it. I didn't let myself do it today when I picked my Final Four. Coming into this, I just can't do it. I don't know why.
I agree.
Won't let myself.
I couldn't agree more. You can't do it. And that's why you also have to say to yourself, like, all right, every single year there's a 12 that wins. Every year there's been a 13 that wins. The 11s have been on a run the past couple of years. I got to make sure I pick 1 or 2 of those guys, right? You got to make sure you have at least 1 12 winning. You got to have at least 1 14 winning, because those are the things that if you get them right, they're shooting you up the ranks, and you get to brag to all your coworkers the next day. Yeah, I had Lipscomb beating Iowa State, actually. Meanwhile, it's one of your 7 brackets, but you get to brag about it for a couple minutes at least, right? So one other thing we'll do before we move on to the next region here, I'm going to ask you guys to pour some cold water possibly on an idea, because I do think there's some schools that casuals like me, we see as an underdog, and we go, oh, I like the cut of their jib, and we have no reason for it. There's no reason why we like them. It just feels right. And to me, you see Lipscomb at 14, and you see Iowa State at 3, and you hear about an injury, and you see a massive spread, and you go, I don't know, something feels fishy. If I were to pick Lipscomb to win in the first round, would you guys pour some cold water on me? Would you tell me to slow my roll there, or do you think that's possible? Maybe this is more about Iowa State if you want to. I don't really care. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say don't stay far away from that. And listen, it's on the record now, so if I look stupid, I look stupid. But just to me, I think that game is just, that one's kind of penciled in already. I just don't see how you shake it. So yeah, I would shy away from that one. Listen, don't get me wrong. There are teams that we're going to talk about, that I definitely can see upsetting other teams. And that's, again, based on what I'm thinking about when I'm watching certain teams play, right? And then thinking about the culture of some, so, because I think as coaches, and Pete could probably testify to this, it's like, some of these programs, and that's why Tom Izzo's so great, like, and Pitino's so great. It's culture orientated too. So yes, they have good ball players, but at the end of the day, they're invested in their coach. They're invested in the time in their program, and they want to win more than they want to see themselves succeed. They want to see their team succeed, right? So, I think that's something that plays a little bit of a role in this as well.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad you actually said you like Michigan too, because I also feel like one thing I try to avoid when I'm filling out my bracket is who is that low seed that everyone seems to like. And UC, I keep saying UC Davis. Jeez Louise. UC San Diego is one of those low seeds that everyone's kind of like, hey, mark them off, like check them out. Michigan kind of disappointing. Maybe they shouldn't even be a 5, all this stuff. And then all of a sudden Michigan comes out and just wins by 9, kind of never has the game in doubt. And you're like, why did everyone like this team again? So I'm glad that you said you liked Michigan. I think that was a good call out. And I'm glad you poured some cold water on my my Lipscomb take. There's no opinion. There's no reason for it. I just thought, I was like, interesting.
Right. No, listen, if I know you mentioned the Iowa State injury, and again, like if there's substance, but when you pick an upset, I think you have to have a little bit more than just, I'm just trying to,
than just vibes,
align with it. Right. But don't get me wrong. Right. I think there are people out there who just have that feeling, and that's, again, why it's fun. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be enjoyable, and I think if you take it in that context, you appreciate it even more as just a basketball fan.
Then everyone wins. That's right. All right, very good. Let's move on to the next part of the region here. We got the West, or I like to call it the bottom left. How you doing? We'll look at Florida as the number 1 seed there. St. John's, everyone's favorite out here on the East Coast right now, the number 2 seed, and some other schools that you're used to seeing in the tournament. Some schools that you're used to picking as an upset possibility, and some really interesting possible matchups that can come to play here. You got, again, Florida as the 1. You got UConn and Oklahoma 8-9, Memphis, Colorado State won that popping up. Grand Canyon last year made a little noise. Also then again, Kansas and Arkansas with Bill Self versus Calipari How many times have they played each other or their teams played against each other in a tournament? Very exciting stuff. So Pete, I'm gonna give you the floor here. This is your time to shine right now. You already kind of called your shot on not loving Florida as a 1 seed right here. Is that more Florida driven, or is that more the strength of this bracket, or both?
It's a little bit of both. Listen, the SEC is as great as it was all year, and it's battle tested. But I do feel like there's a little bit of they beat each other up all year. Okay, again, they came out on top. They look great. Okay, but I will say this: lurking in that. Okay, and he said you better get them early a few years ago, because if UConn can get past that game, that 8-9, I think that's a really tough scenario for Florida, because you got guys that have been there as in coaches, and you got Caravan who's been there as a player, and I think and I said this before in terms of fragile ones, they are my pick. If a 1 seed was going to go home this weekend coming up, it's Florida. I said big if. I'm not saying they're gonna, but if I had to pick one to go home this weekend, it would be Florida. And again, that's if UConn gets past it. Okay, you have a lot of other things going on in this bracket, which is absolutely tremendous. Kansas Arkansas game is just top notch, top billing, right? And then the winner of that hopefully gets a piece of my St. John's team, which I think the city has embraced. New York City has gotten behind this team. It's incredible. I haven't seen it in a long time. New York City get behind the team the way they have here. My upset special in this bracket, again, I don't know if it's a trendy upset special, is the 12-5. I like Colorado State over Memphis. I think a lot of people do. Just
They're
because
favored
of
in
that.
the game, by the way.
Yeah, that 12-5. That 12-5. Are they favored? I don't
favored.
follow that as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's it to me. And also sitting down there, and again, I love St. John's with all my heart, but Maryland is also sitting there, and they're lurking, and they're getting stronger and stronger. So my heart's with the Johnnies. I don't think it's going to be Florida. There's just too much talk about them right now. I don't know what's happening there. The hype machine. I mean, you got to understand, for a few weeks, it was Auburn. It was Alabama, right? You didn't hear too much about Florida. I feel like Florida's coming on. Again, they're coming on at the right time. But I just feel like there's something tricky going on there that as a bracketeer, a bracketologist, I just don't see it. But again, I've been wrong before plenty of times. So,
Ackery, what about you? You standing on some business when it comes to Florida?
Yeah, I know Pete's gonna break my chops when we hang this thing up. He's gonna say, I'm against him on this one, but I don't see it the way he does. I think he made.
But hold on. But see,
go ahead.
That's why it's good that we coach together. Yes. You don't want to coach with somebody that tells you you're right all the time either.
That's true.
Exactly.
You need somebody to tell you, no, I don't see it that way.
100%.
Otherwise, it doesn't work. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, but again, analyzing Florida a little bit, I think you're hitting the right stride come March, and Pete did make that point, right? Everybody talks about, Clayton for them and their guard play. But to me, I watched Alex Condon, and he's like an X factor for them, right? And I think they'll go as far as he, can help them, right? Offensively, defensively, again, circling back to something I said before. How good can a team be and creative can a team be offensively? And how well can they protect the rim, or shots at the rim, right? Defensively, and also being strong on the glass, that ties into it. And again, watching Florida play, it's like I'm seeing a lot of that. They're an intense team. They play with a lot of energy. That's exactly what you kind of want in March. The home team thing doesn't really matter as much. Yes, you watch them at home and they play good. And now the games will be on neutral sites. But there's so much to them. and they're finding ways to really grind out. Second half, right? They look like they're just playing really good ball in the second half. That's another thing I think that's been a big thing that I've watched in college this year is like how good are some of these top teams in the second half, right? Of a game. And I think Florida is a team that has been able to adjust a lot in the second half. Their record shows it. To me, I think they waltz into the Final Four. But again, that's easy to say with the one next to your name, right? It really is. I agree with Pete 100% on the Colorado State. That's one of my. I feel real confident. Again, it's funny because we're on a podcast. I can't wait. So
yeah, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Colorado State," and then all of a sudden they lose in the first round. Everyone had them. Yeah.
But I'm upset because I didn't know how many people I get. I don't pay attention to the outside noise when I'm doing this, right? So I didn't know that a lot of people were in agreement with me. To me, Memphis, right? Colorado State has some tourney experience from last year, right? They're not as good as they were last year, I think, but they're still experienced, and then, watching Memphis, they turn the ball over so much, right? And they have Tyrese Hunter, who's injured, right? They kind of barely survived in the AAC tourney, right? Couple 1-point victories. And then they obviously were able to kind of do exactly what they had to do against UAB. I actually think they looked pretty good against UAB in the second half. But again, I just think there's a lot of questions when it comes to Memphis and how good really are they, as opposed to some of the schedule and who they've played, right? So I align with them there. Team we haven't talked about on the left side, I don't want to keep going too long, but I hope we can kind of talk a little bit about Drake.
Well. I was actually Can you hold that thought? Because I was about to. I'm about to cue you up because another thing that I see a lot. I don't know if you guys follow the trapezoid of excellence in this whole thing here. Are you guys familiar with this whole thing?
What's it called? Are you talking about
the net rating by pace?
Yes.
Right.
It's
so if you look,
quads.
Right. So there's four. It's a regular old chart with net rating going up
Drake's
and
all the way on the bottom.
Pace going not on the bottom, but
there's somewhere in the middle.
No, so it's pace and net rating. It's not just offense and defense. It's a little bit maybe different than what you're referring to. So it doesn't mean because you're a slow pace team that you're a bad team. It just means your style is probably different, right? So Drake has by far the slowest pace out of any team in the 68. So they are lower than a 60 on a pace scale.
Yeah.
And then like, for example, like Alabama is well over above 74. Right. So Drake is again, the slowest paced team. They're still a plus 15 net rating, but they're playing up against Missouri, correct? So then Missouri is on the other side of the median where they're over 68. They're probably based off what I'm looking here, like the 8th or 9th fastest team from a pace perspective in the league. So when you see something like that, the clash of style, that's what you're kind of about to refer to, I assume, Acri. So go ahead, take it back from Drake.
Yeah, no, I just think, they're a team also that is a defensive-minded team. They defend the three real well. I actually dug a little, teams like Drake that you don't watch as much, you dig a little bit more on the defensive, I should say the statistic side. So I do know that they defend the three particularly well, which when you're going into a game like this and you're an underdog, a lot of times players will come out and they're going to look to fire and just get theirs. It's just part of basketball. I think thinking about the, what we look at and the seeding and all that stuff. Like, think about yourself as a player. If you went out there and you knew it was you're a 1 seed and you're playing a 16 seed, you're looking at 420 points and get up 20 at half, and then you don't play the whole second half, right? And that's just a player perspective, I think. So again, just circling back to Drake, there's a lot of homegrown guys there, a lot of Division II guys. Coach Ben McCollum kind of, I believe, brought those guys over. And then, they have this guy, Bennett Sturts. People are starting to talk about him. Again, haven't watched him enough, watched him very little to be able to speak on how great he is as a player. But you do see a lot of chatter, a lot of noise about him. And I think when you talk about powerhouse teams, right, Missouri is not a team that comes up in that conversation a lot, right? And again, this is all just opinionated stuff, but they're not one of those teams where, if they play a team that like Drake that comes out there and just wants to compete and kind of make a name for themselves, I could see it going their way or going in their favor.
I love it.
So
I love
that's
it.
a game that I'm looking forward to watching and just kind of seeing how that plays out.
And for the record, over the past couple of years, I saw a stat the other day that the 11s are actually becoming even more successful than the 12s, because for such a long time, like our entire lives, basically, it's always been, hey, watch out for that 5-12. You don't want a part of that 5-12.
Yeah.
The 11 might be the new 12. And yeah, of course, you can argue, oh, well, it's a higher seed. Well, come on. When we're talking 10, 11, 12, well, maybe not 10 because they're playing the set, whatever. 11 through 14 at this point in time, I think over the last like 6-7 years, have become a little more homogenous. So the 11s have been hot in the past couple of years, and that might come into some people's minds. All right, let's clear out quickly on the Johnnies here for a second, because then we got to start running through these other two sides over here. St. John's, pretty specific type of basketball team. They are going to grind. They are going to beat you up. They are going to rebound. They are going to get in transition a little bit, and they are tough. Now, to quote Rick Pitino, not exactly quote him verbatim, but to kind of quote Rick Pitino, I'm pretty sure he said he wanted to kill himself when he watched his team take jump shots and free throws.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Is that something that he actually said this year? So we know who they are. It's obviously been a phenomenal story. It has been so exciting for the city. You're seeing people rally around the Johnnies. It's awesome. However, I hate to be the guy to point out the news here that you got to make shots sometimes in the tournament. Because right now, what I hear when I hear St. John's and making a run, I think about all the years in our life where West Virginia was a top 2 seed and they were going to make a run because they played defense harder than anybody else. And guess what it came down to? They couldn't score against teams that were just as good as them. Does St. John's coach Pete Tutrone have issues, have worries on the offensive side that could hinder them from making that deep run?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly do, but I think like you saw in the last couple days in the Big East tournament, their runs are explosive. I mean, they are game-changing runs. I mean, they took the heart out of Marquette. They took the heart out of Creighton. I mean, literally, like, as a coach, you're sitting there and unfortunately, we've been on the receiving end of them, but we've also been on the giving end of them. And when you see runs like that, they can pretty much play with anybody. Now, in the NCAA tournament, it becomes much more of a possession game. Every possession matters. Everything's much more exposed. And but that, what you're referring to, Pete, that could happen to anybody. The not hitting shots, going cold, missing free throws. I think the thing that St. John's really has going for them is they play incredible defense. They defend. And I think as long as they can continue to defend, they're going to have an opportunity to play with anybody. So I think that's what's going to be really important to them, because their defense really has been propelling their offense. So as long as they can defend and get stops and then get out in transition, they should be able to play with anybody. But again, those are big ifs.
Yeah. Acri, what do you think about St. John's?
Yeah, so, when it comes to UConn and St. John's, right, both Big East teams, both in the same bracket, right, St. John's at the end of the day has something that UConn doesn't, and this is why I'm not really a big believer in UConn and a believer in St. John's, to answer the question twofold, right? UConn, right, you have Solo, you have Caravan, you have McNeely, great players, but watching them all year, there's no guy who, is the guy at the end of the game. There's a lot of questions when it comes to that, right? And I think what's great about St. John's is, yes, they might have shooting struggles. Yes, they might not be great from the free throw line. But at the end of games, when it comes to winning time, right, they have their guy in RJ Lewis, right? And I think that's really important to understand. And that's a big thing in March, right? Who's the guy who's going to be able to make plays and win games for his team? And I think my bigger concern with St. John's, and again, I think that they're going to be able to make a run, but I'm more worried about the sustainability because they play such great defense, because they pick up full court, right? Is that going to take a toll on these guys over time, right? Or are they ready to go, right? My hope is that they're ready to go. But when you're playing, in such short time spans, and they were able to do it in the Big East, right? So they answered that question kind of in the Big East tournament. But this is another level. As you get closer to the final, you're going to run into tougher competition. And again, they don't have they're playing the Kansas Arkansas winner, right? And again, I think Arkansas. I'm not really too high on Kansas this year. Arkansas's got Boogie Fland, New York City native, coming back. Calipari's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. Mark Pope has things really running well at Kentucky. They've hit a nice little stride. Arkansas kind of took a step back, but is now getting back to where they kind of were pre-Boogie Fland injury, and now they're getting him back, right? So, they're not in an advantage if they're able to obviously get past Omaha, but you get past the second round, and now things kind of start looking their way, right? Because now you run into Texas Tech or UNC Wilmington or Missouri Drake, like one of those combinations. That's who they go to next, right? Obviously, Texas Tech would be the team that they're assuming that they'll get to, or we all can assume as we talk on this podcast. But there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, within those games. So I'm all in favor of St. John's. I'm riding with them, and I think they have a playmaker in R.J. Lewis that can really help them get to where they got to go.
All right, I love to hear it. Really quick, and let's keep this one pushing because we got two more sides to get to here, and we're already running kind of long here. Will you pour cold water on me if I wanted to take Grand Canyon over Maryland?
You could take that one, Pete.
I would tell you should get a towel for the cold water.
Good to know. And listen, the reason I ask is this: Grand Canyon was an upset last year, right?
Yeah.
They made an upset last year.
Doubt.
And people who are not locked in and not paying attention to who are on these teams and who transferred in and who transferred out, they like, oh, Grand Canyon, didn't they do something last year? I like them this year. Bang, and they select them. They don't know. Right. So hearing it, you guys already both mentioned Maryland as a team to take very seriously here, and that's why I asked that question. All right, let's move on here. We'll go up to the top right, aka the East, and this is Duke, and I'm assuming Acree's just going to say Duke to the Final Four, right?
Just
no
Duke,
questions asked.
Duke and
everyone. We don't even have to talk about it. You said we're short on time. I can tell you exactly why. I could tell you exactly why.
You mean the bracket? Thing. Duke and everyone else?
Yeah, Duke and everyone else.
Duke and all these just the fillers?
Yeah, they got the ease. They got the freaking cakewalk bracket, huh? What's going on over here?
Their bracket, I would love to be. Yeah, we should really dabble on that the bracket in totality because I do think there are some teams to discuss. One thing I'll say about Duke before we go into all this is it's their depth that impresses me more than anything else, and I think that's important in March. They have guys off the bench that can start on some of the teams in the tournament, and I'll just leave it at that. But we could keep moving. And
I also think Knipple, who I was calling Knupel.
It's hard to get these guys' names right. There's so many guys.
So if you played 2K, you can like download the draft class in like a franchise mode and whatever.
Clips of it.
Yeah, so I've downloaded a draft class like well before I think I was even watching Duke this year, and I ended up drafting Conrad Knupel. So I thought now I find out his name's Knipple this whole time. I would have liked him a little more. You know what I'm saying? But here we are. He's been standing up big since Cooper Flagg went down, and really showing why he's projected to be a lottery pick most likely, if not top 10, if not top 6 or 7 in this upcoming draft. So his shooting is obviously legit. He's got 6'7" size, and like he's a real deal freshman as well. It's not just Flagg, who's obviously the projected number 1 overall pick. All right, on this bracket, we also have Alabama, who's famously the fastest team or quickest pace team in the NCAA tournament. You got some other interesting squads out here. Baylor, they're not the same as they were when they won the title a few years back, but, still a team to take serious. Arizona with Caleb Love, kind of interesting. VCU is another one of these teams that people know, and they don't even know that Shaka Smart has moved on from them, 10 years ago at this point, whatever it was. But people see him at 11, they say, hey, I like that team, right? So that's some intrigue, at least in that bracket, even if we feel like there is a team that is favorite for a good reason to win that one. And quickly for the record there, Duke is minus 120 to win their region, which is right in line with Auburn and Florida, unlike Houston, which we'll get to in the next one, which is actually plus 105 to win their bracket. So Duke is a standard 1 seed favorite in that side. So anything stand out? Any matchups really stand out to you guys?
I'll take it. Yeah.
I mean, I got my upsets, but that's about it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I see Duke going.
To me, right, I think St. Mary's Vanderbilt, that's the game that I'm going to really try to key into a lot. And I think it's more just because I feel a lot of people, when it comes to St. Mary's, I think there's this perception around Gonzaga, and who's also in the tournament, that, they're always the team, from their conference, that is the team that makes the statement in the tournament. Where, when it comes to St. Mary's, right, they're just a team, again, defensive minded. I have them beating Vandy. I think Vandy has impressed me at times. But again, I think watching Mount, they're able to do things that in the early rounds of the tournament can really give you an advantage, right? And you spoke about Drake and pace of play. And I think, again, they're a team that's a little bit more systemic, where it's like they're going to go out and kind of be disciplined, make the right plays, keep this game close. And then, if they can execute at the end, they're going to pull that one out. So that's my game to watch. If you're looking for a real good basketball game, obviously there's other ones, that might shape out to be real good. Hopefully the Duke game isn't. Hopefully they just kind of go in there and do what they have to do. But to me, that's the game that I'm looking forward to watching. I obviously love to watch. I think, Wisconsin, Alabama, love to watch both of those teams. I'm sure we can kind of talk a little bit more on them. But I'd rather just pass the question back to Pete or whatever you feel is best.
So real quick, when I look at a bracket like this East seeding bracket, this is where, if I was trying to win my bracket and I was looking to pull off the craziest upsets possible, I would put Duke all the way over, and then I would go a little crazy here because I don't know that anybody could touch Duke here, right? For many reasons. They may have gotten stronger this past weekend, learning how to play without Cooper Flag, right? They may have grown up to where they need them to be, okay? But with that being said, I would put Duke through, and then I'd be looking at all my upsets. I'd be looking at Akron. I'd be looking at VCU getting past Brigham Young. So those are a couple things I would look at, but I would start moving and looking to see if I could pick a few of those early upsets here and then bring Duke all the way forward. But Duke is strong. Duke is real strong. They're gaining strength. Now, a little bit of it will hang on Cooper Flagg's ankle here and how he holds up, which I'm sure he'll be fine.
Yeah, and if you look at the old trapezoid of excellence there too, Duke kind of stands out into a league of their own in that regard. And I'm going to put it up on the screen on YouTube here so you guys can see it as well.
Right.
If you're watching on YouTube and now
I got you.
Coach
Now,
Pete
I didn't
and
see
Coach
this,
Ackery.
actually.
I should have put this up earlier. I don't know why I didn't. I could have
this
done
I
it the
didn't
whole
see.
time. So now it's basically, if anyone's just listening on audio here, there's a trapezoid figure at the top of this graph here. And it's basically pulling in the teams with the highest net rating and then a mixture of teams that are a little slower pace and a little bit faster pace. So it kind of takes the outliers like Alabama with the fastest pace out and Drake with the slowest pace out. But Duke sits there kind of in a league of its own with the highest net rating of the entire tournament with a like relatively slow pace, but they play with so much purpose as well, which I think you guys are alluding to. They have so much talent, so much depth, so many high quality IQ players that are just kind of built to succeed against anybody. And that's the beauty of Duke really in that regard, is that they're kind of built to beat anybody. But if you look over at some other teams in that region there, you have Arizona, they're lingering right below it. You got Akron, who plays a really fast style of basketball. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that always creates variance when you get to the tournament. So those are the types of things that you're looking for when you're looking for upsets. Could an Akron make a run for one or two, and maybe when they run into Alabama or Duke, like they're screwed, but they make that little run and you steal some points in the bracket there. So yeah, I think that's kind of what you're alluding to on that side.
And those little bit of runs, like you talk about, like they make careers, right?
Right.
Win 2 games in the tournament and you become the next name. and that's also the beauty of this tournament.
So, all right, sounds good there. If you guys weren't to go with Duke to win this one, say, you know, they get upset or, you know, someone else goes down or whatever happens and they don't make it out, who is the other team that you guys would bet on here? Like if I said you had to pick someone else besides Duke, who are you taking in this region?
Joseph?
Yeah, I mean the quick answer is Alabama, but I think it's not on Sears for them, right? I think Nate Oates does a good job, but it's Grant Nelson, it's even Chris Youngblood. Like when I watch them, I think like he's a guy who can do more, and when he does, they win games. You know, but I don't want to count Wisconsin out. Okay, if it's not Duke, to me, I think Wisconsin played real well in their conference tournament. Okay, came up short, right, but did a lot of really good things. They have Tonji. He needs to be that guy in the tournament. He's a guy who can be the guy in the tournament and make a name for himself. I mean, you saw it in their conference play, but now it's in front of everybody, right? So he has that potential to him in his style of play. So again, I wasn't really impressed with Alabama on the back end. I was more impressed with Wisconsin. So if it wasn't to be Duke, I would be going with Wisconsin. But at the end of the day, the one thing I want to say is I really hope Arizona gets to Duke because I want to get a little revenge on Caleb Love for when he was on UNC. I'm like praying for Arizona. So I don't want that. I don't want that upset there that we're talking about with Akron.
I like Caleb Love, man. I gotta say he's one of the guys I've watched a good bit of this year, and he just seems like he is matured enough. He's a senior, no, right?
Yeah,
he's one of those like
fifth year or fourth year because
right. One of those
at UNC
situations.
And then transferred. So
yeah, he's one of these guys who seems like he's just been able to rise above the competition because of the experience he's had at the level. So, Coach Pete, what about you? Anyone else outside of Duke?
Simple enough. I'm with Joe. Not sold on Alabama. I would key in on Wisconsin.
Very good. All right, last one here, the bottom right. We got the Midwest, which is led by Houston as the number 1 seed. We got Tennessee, who actually nets out quite well in this old trapezoid of excellence that I keep referring to at least here. They're the 2 seed. Then you also sit with Kentucky, Purdue and Clemson, Gonzaga and Georgia, and some other low seeds here that have kind of been the talk of the town. So let me ask you guys this. When you hear about a low seed like McNeese, who was the talk of the town last year, has been another one of the talk of the towns this year as a low seed, that it just seems like, oh, everyone wants to pick them. When you hear that, do you get skeptical? Because I do. Pete, go ahead.
Okay, so I am skeptical with the whole McNeese State.
So you've heard the hype, though, too.
Yeah, you always do. As soon as these brackets come out, ESPN, the bracketologists, the Seth Greenberg, Billis, Tom Crean, they're all pumping up this team, and this is Will Wade, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Will Wade, yeah, guy does an outstanding job. I just thought they're playing Clemson, right? I like Clemson. Clemson, and I think Joe can attest that Clemson. He's watched a lot of ACC. Clemson's a good team. Listen, McNeese is a strong team. They're going to be right there. I know Coach Ackrey loves them. I know he likes them. I know he's chomping at his bottom lip, ready to talk about them. So I'm going to let him go off a little bit about them right now.
No, I mean, listen, I was, again, just watching games, and you just have expectations of teams, right? I think Clemson's loss to Louisville was a little exposing. They have a 3-headed monster with Hunter Shefflin, or however you say his last name, and Lacken, the big, right? But there was a lot of bad body language towards the end of the game in Louisville, technical foul on Lacken, I think, when they ended up only losing that game by 3, but they were down 11-12 with a minute and a half, 2 minutes to go. Honestly, I think there was 2 minutes left and they were down double digits, and they fought all the way back and took a shot to win or to tie. But again, I just saw things that kind of exposed them a little bit. And I think you think of a McNeese team that's scrappy. They got the guy Shoemate. He's a dog. Like, he's going to get after it. They have the guy Copeland. He's a bucket getter. He's going to try to score it. and they play at a tremendous pace, at least from some of the games that I've seen them play in, where it's like Clemson's just kind of walking into the wrong game at the wrong time, in a sense, in my opinion. And I'm not a big buy the hype guy. I really feel like I'm not. But watching a lot of ACC, being so impressed with Clemson, seeing Clemson lose to Louisville, it's like, what have you done for me lately? I don't know where their heads are at as players, and I can't speak for that. And, I'm not, I can't read minds. But what I can tell you is McNeese has a tremendous amount of momentum. They have people behind them. And now Clemson just feels like they might have lost their identity because they played Louisville and they in a game they should have won and lost. So that's where I kind of am at with that. Listen, if Clemson gets, it's so funny to say it this way, right? But if Clemson gets past McNeese, I think the rest of their way, even if getting to Houston, like if they just hit that stride, get past McNeese, then they'll probably see Purdue. They'll probably see Houston. I know the Zags are right above them, and Georgia's right above them, and we can talk about that a little bit too. But they match up well enough with Houston where they can make their run. I'm not discrediting Clemson and the amazing season they had. But I do think it's just kind of timing is everything a little bit in this tournament, and McNeese's timing is they're up there at an all-time high right now. Which again, you try to ride the hot hand a little bit.
So I want to move on real quickly because I think that was well played by both of you there with the McNeese because it's one of those things like it could go and like Coach Pete's going to look like a genius because he told everyone to relax on the McNeese thing, or the upset happens and you don't look that bad because you were just betting against a 12 seed, right? So it's not that bad. But Acri does kind of see it, and you're not alone, dude. A lot of people really like what they've been doing. But on the flip side of things here, I want to talk about Tennessee really quick because Tennessee is a team that is very good all the time, right? They seem to just be really close to in it every year. Well, at least going into the tournament. And that's my question. When you have a team like Tennessee who has become famous for blowing it, a team famous for underperforming in the tournament, they're a 2 seed constantly. They just feel like the quintessential 2 seed. But they do underperform from time to time. I'll never forget how much I love Grant Williams and Admiral Schofield and watch them crash and burn in the tournament, right?
Yeah.
When you see a team that you feel like you've been burned by in the past, do you feel like you should be hesitant with that team again? I know last year they were in the Elite Eight. So listen, maybe they broke it a little bit. But before that, it was like round of 32, round of 32, round of 16, round of 32. They just lived in that range. So when you see a team that you've been burned by before, do you feel hesitant even though it's a whole different group of players? Acri, go ahead. Or Pete, go ahead. Whatever wants to go.
I just real quick. I just feel like, you do see that as a trend. I mean, I felt it with Virginia when they lost, right? That first round game. I felt it with Purdue. That, the next year you're looking at them, and even though they're not the same team, and they didn't, and it's a different body of work, you do have those prejudices towards them, right? And you feel that, right? And again, Tennessee, you look at them the same way, right? But I think the thing that's not often spoken about is when you get to this part of the year, winning is really, really hard. Like, and it's a grind. Like this is, like we even talk about those tournaments we just watched, right? It's day after day after day. Like, and if you're one of those low seeds making a run, you're playing 4 days in a row. Here, okay, it's a day off. It's another, but sometimes you don't even go back to campus and you just go to the next site more than likely. So winning is hard. And I think, yes, you do take on those prejudices towards the team based on the previous year's performances. I don't think it's probably correct, but, you're not wrong. Tennessee always seems to get just to that point, and then it kind of falls down a little bit. But this is definitely a bracket where I could see many teams getting through. I'm not sold on anybody just yet. completely.
Acri, what do you think about my theory about being burned in the past?
Yeah, I definitely think it plays a role. One thing about this Tennessee team, watching them the last couple days, I think I know they didn't win. Obviously, they didn't win the SEC, but I think they became a better team in the
Mm.
losing efforts. A little bit of a flip side of a lot of what I've said before about some teams like Clemson maybe, got exposed. I don't think Tennessee got exposed. I think they played good ball. They have senior leadership in Zakai Ziegler. Lanier, the transfer, it can score it. He came in this year and really did a number for them. Or he might be a 2-year guy there now. But, those are the guys they need to lean on. And to me, the only thing that's in their way, right? Because, again, I think Houston is, out of my one seeds, who's the most beatable. I think Houston is the team that's the most beatable. But to me, more of a problem for them is going to be, Kentucky. I talked about executing X's and O's. Mark Pope has impressed me, man. And they've battled injuries all year. I think they've played some good ball. They've won some big ones. So that's a block in the road for them. They get past that, right? And then you see how it shapes up on the top of that bracket, and you let it play out. But Kentucky, I'll tell you right now, like Illinois is there. They play the winner of, Illinois versus Texas, the winner of Texas versus Xavier. Whatever team wins that 11 seed, I know we're not really talking about that much, but that Texas Xavier game in the first four in, that is going to be a hell of a game. And even if it's not, right, because Texas is incredible, right? Xavier's more Sean Miller, love him, but, like they're a team that's so explosive offensively where it makes it a little bit harder. So I know I'm going a little bit off the Tennessee talk, but just talking a little bit more about that bracket because I do think it is going to be Kentucky, Tennessee to go play probably Houston. That's how I have it drawn out a lot. I do have Tennessee getting past them, and then I do have Tennessee beating Houston.
Ooh, there we go. So I was just going to say this. Tennessee, according to my looks here, has never made a Final Four.
Yeah, so
but they did last year make it to the Elite Eight. And maybe they kind of broke that a little bit last year with making that Elite Eight, getting past that Sweet 16, which was like really their point. That was just
They didn't make it the year, the COVID year, the year after COVID, when it was like no fans.
2021, they made it to 2021. They lost in the first round. And then 2022, they made it just to the round of 32. 23.
Houston. We're talking about Houston?
Oh, I was talking about Tennessee still.
Oh, sorry.
Houston made it. Yeah. Houston did make it.
Yeah.
Tennessee has not made a Final Four in their school history, which is so surprising to me. But that's what I'm seeing here.
Pete, you know who played for Tennessee, right?
I don't know where you're going.
Your beloved New York Knicks. You know who played for Tennessee, right?
Give me an era.
Bernard
King. How about that?
And Ernie Grunfeld. And the Bernie and Ernie show.
So Bernard King would have been in 79?
Way back. Yeah.
77, I forget. But yeah, they never made a Final Four, so maybe this is the year to get Tennessee in the Final Four for the first time. Also, one more thing that I just will note here quickly, and then we'll get to our final picks for the Elite Eight. I guess we'll do. Maybe we'll do Final Four. We'll see how you guys feel on that. With those 11 playing games, San Diego State, North Carolina, Texas, Xavier, like Acri just mentioned there. I kind of love the momentum idea. Those guys get a little bit of NCAA tournament taste in their mouth going in to go play a 6 seed. A 6 seeds are not teams that are typically incredibly strong. They're usually very middling. It's not very frequently you see a 6 seed, make massive runs. So you got the winner of North Carolina, San Diego State playing Ole Miss. And then like Acri just mentioned, the winner of Texas, Xavier playing Illinois. If you like a specific team there, like I like North Carolina right here, almost solely on the fact that everybody's pissed they made the tournament. And when you have a team that everyone says shouldn't make it, I know Syracuse was an option on this a few years ago. Everyone was like, how the hell did Syracuse make an 11 seed in the first 4, whatever? And then they went and win like 2 rounds. I'm just saying, watch out. Watch out for the 11 play-ins. They have a way of building momentum. All right. Let's make some picks here. Some final thoughts.
Sure.
Coach Pete, why don't you kick us off here? Do you have an Elite Eight ready for us, or do you want to just go Final Four?
I have a Final Four, but if you want an Elite Eight.
Hit me with a Final Four.
Final Four. Okay. Got Michigan State, Duke, St. John's,
Mm.
and here's my zinger, Clemson.
Wow, I love it. I
All
love
right?
it. Take the
I'm rolling the
McNeese
dice.
hype and shove it, he says.
I'm rolling the dice. That's it. A 1, 2 twos, and a 5.
Fantastic. Acri, what do you got for us?
All right. So I'm going to have to go to my legit. This is my legit bracket, just so you guys can.
It's your bracket of integrity, buddy.
This is my authentic. I said it a little bit earlier. On the left side, my Final Four, I got Michigan versus Michigan State, the rematch. And then on the right, I have Duke versus Tennessee. I apologize. I'm sorry. I just misread that completely. Michigan versus Florida, and then I have Duke, and then I have Tennessee. So
right. Oh yeah, because Michigan and Michigan State will play
Michigan
before
State.
that.
I have Michigan
in the
beating
Elite Eight.
Michigan State to get to the Final Four.
So you went 3 1s and a 2.
No, I went
5, 2
Michigan's a
1s,
5,
and a 2.
Tennessee's
you
a
went
2.
5. Okay.
To me,
like
Duke
it.
and Florida are on a different level, and I think that would be something that I kind of want to close with, I guess, on my opinion. And you can, again, this is going to be clipped, so when they both get bounced, I'm going to look stupid, but
we all are.
I was really impressed with, and honestly, as a Duke fan, like take the bias out. Like Florida has impressed me a little bit more than Duke up to this point tonight. You know what I'm saying? And Duke did a lot of good things without Cooper Flagg, but I really like the way Florida's playing. I don't know if growing up I was a big Tim Tebow fan or something, and maybe that's kind of weighing in on this, but. And then I've changed hearts on Michigan. And again, I think Tennessee finally gets it done a little bit and gets that push into the Final Four. I'm kind of pulling for them, because I was a big Alabama guy. Like Alabama was in my Final Four in a couple that I've looked at. But then I've changed to Tennessee. I've kind of been persuaded a little bit thinking about their play this week and thinking about where Alabama's at.
All right. I guess that's my turn now. For my Final Four, I'm going to go with Auburn. I think Auburn has been a top dog all year. They're going to keep to it and come out on top of that bracket there. Then on the bottom left on the west side, I'm going to go Maryland. I think Maryland's a sneaky dog here not a dog obviously in the first round, but a dog to make a run in this bracket here. They are right next to St. John's when it comes to net rating. So everyone's loving on St. John's, obviously, in this neck of the woods up here. I think Maryland's a fantastic team. They just play better offense and slightly worse defense. And if they can kind of tighten up the defense in the tourney a little bit and keep that offensive punch, I like Maryland to come out. I'm going to stick with you, Acri. I like Tennessee. I'm here. I'm going to get burned again. I want to get hurt again.
Baby. Let's get it.
I'm ready to get burned again.
Coming to work in Tennessee orange when they win if they win this whole thing, but I hope not, because then they got to beat Duke.
Yeah. So then I'll go Tennessee, and then I'm going to go with Wisconsin. I just can't pick Duke to make the Final Four. I know it's the right move, but I also going to play a little bracket strategy, right? Like everybody in my bracket is most likely going to have Duke in their Final Four. If I want to differentiate myself, I want to basically the way I look at it, if you like Duke to make the Final Four, you might as well be picking them to win the damn thing, because that's how you're going to make your points there. Because some people are going to pick them to, almost everyone in your bracket is going to pick them to make the Final Four. So you're not really gaining a ton of points there. So I like getting them, to that point, the Elite Eight there, and you make a decision and you full send it. And if you miss out, you miss out, but you got to take those risks. So I'm going to take my risk with Wisconsin. And I actually waited to hear what you guys said about some of the other teams in the bracket. So if I'm wrong, it's kind of on you guys. I'll just throw that out there.
I'll take it.
The good thing about this is that you didn't ask us for every single one of our picks, so we gave you a couple opinions, but you don't know what's set on some
That's
of these
okay. Hey, listen, this podcast is long enough without making every single pick. That would have taken a really long time, but this was fantastic. Can I ask you guys, we have one more minute here real quick?
Absolutely.
Sure.
I want to ask you guys a random-ish question, because it doesn't have to do with the tournament necessarily. It has to do with the next level and the NBA draft. Is there a player that you are either extraordinarily excited to see because you think he could make that, leap in the draft, or is there somebody who's already, pretty high up on the draft boards that you think is going to make an even bigger name for themselves? Basically, is there an NBA draft riser in this tournament? So not Cooper Flagg, Acri.
Yeah, I wasn't going there, but I still am going to be biased. to the Blue Devils. Isaiah Evans, slim. Interesting player. At times can give you 16, 19. He scored a couple games. Sometimes he gives you 2. Sometimes he plays 6 minutes. I think John Shire didn't have a lot of trust in him and then developed that trust over time. I think he's proven himself. I think he realized he had to pick up his draft stock by becoming a better defender. You've actually seen that in some of his games. His scoring has went down a little bit. And he's high energy. I think his body translates really well to the NBA. So that's bias. I'll just be open and I'll admit that. But at least I didn't say Malawach, who's the center on Duke, who I think is having a phenomenal year. I just don't know how well his game will translate to the NBA. But I do think Evans is a guy to look out for when he gets to the league.
Pete, you got someone for us?
Yeah, not to kind of stay with the Blue Devils, but I guess I'm going to. How do you pronounce his name again, Coach?
Kneppel.
Kneppel.
Got 3 brothers. I met him at Cameron.
That's great. I look at a guy like him, and I try and see like the way NBA teams are built, right? And it seems like they always have that fringe guy that comes in, like Boston has Pritchard, Cleveland has Ty Jerome now, and he just seems like he kind of fits that mold that if he can get on a roster, he's not going to be the guy, but he's going to be an important piece to a team that does some good things. Kind of what I was hoping the Knicks were going to be able to do with Kolek this year. Just guys that kind of build and create that team and give a team a little bit more depth, like you could definitely see him coming on to a team and being like, maybe not 6, but maybe somewhere in 7, 8, 9, going in, giving you 6 to 8 minutes a night, spelling some guys, doing some good things.
And Knippel, I think, will be a guy who benefits from the space in the NBA. Yeah. Obviously, he can really shoot the basketball, which is fantastic. Like, when you got somebody who in college is taking 6 threes a game at 39% and shooting 90% from the free throw line, you're like, all right, this guy's got one incredibly translatable skill. And free throw percentage is one of the biggest keys in projecting shooters at the NBA. So he, again, taking 6 threes of the game per game in college and 90% from the free throw line, 39% from 3. He is like a surefire NBA player. I think is kind of what you're saying. Like, he's a guy who you might take at 6'7", and he might not make an all-star team, but he might be your 4th best starter for 12 years. And that's a pretty damn good guy to grab.
And in terms of longevity and, getting what you can out of a guy that you draft, like not in the top 3, it's huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Who's your pick, Pete?
I wanted to ask you guys, because I haven't seen enough of him live. I've only seen clips and watching some YouTube stuff. Is VJ Edgecombe a guy who you guys think projects at a high level next year? Because he's top 5 in all the projections for the draft, but I haven't watched full games of his just yet.
Go ahead, Coach.
Yeah, listen, I think when you talk about him, and Pete made a good point too, like development in the league. I think these guys are very fortunate now. They get in the right hands. If he's drafted by the right team, he can definitely take those next steps in development. The draft is a unique thing, right? Because the projections come out, right? And then there's always guys who go 25 plus on the back end, and then they end up being really good players in the NBA, right? So for him, I think it's all about what team takes him and then how well he can develop within that team, within that system, right? And then that's the interesting thing about the NBA with the lottery, which you don't know who really gets to one. It's not like the NFL where it's kind of all set in stone and where guys are going to go. So yeah, I think his game translates enough. It's just more about the NBA is a different game than college. It is, right? And that's why we use the word translation when we talk about this. So, he has the tools, he has the skills. It's about being around the right system and, being able to play within that system and succeed within that system.
Yeah. I'll give you one more name. This is my real pick because I've seen him a little bit. I've watched some Arizona this year, and I'm not going Caleb Love. I'm going Carter Bryant. I like Carter Bryant. I don't know what he is going to be necessarily yet at the next level, because he's kind of one of those tweener sized people. Like he's a wing like big. I don't know yet exactly what he's going to be, but he can kind of shoot the ball a little bit. I really like what he does defensively, with, projecting to be a decent rebounder as well. Like, he's really active. I do like his body size and his athleticism. So Carter Bryant's someone I'm intrigued by. I'll say that. I don't know what he's going to be, but if he can actually help Arizona and help Caleb Love be a real team to make a run here, he's a freshman who, if he goes into the draft this year, is projected somewhere in the 20s probably. And I could see him working his way towards lottery, because, again, 6'8", 225, athletic, is not playing a crap ton for Arizona. Like, he's not even playing 20 minutes a game, but he's a guy who, again, I think could really benefit from the next level of the space and using that athleticism to kind of combine with some of the skills he has. So Carter Bryant, keeping an eye out. All right. That's all we got. Subway Sports Talk. It's been Coach Pete Tutrone, Coach Joe Ackery. If all your picks suck now, guys, everyone out there, listen, if your brackets are busted, you can blame
this guy,
Mr. Coach Ackery over here. No, I'm just kidding. Of course.
That.
No, it's good stuff, guys. I appreciate you. You're two people who I know care about this sport, watch this sport, and truly, take this serious. So I appreciate your guys' time on a Monday night, staying up a little late with me, talking some sports. And shout out to Danny Fisher, who, I rudely forgot to invite onto this podcast. But now next year, I have no choice, but Danny Fisher is going to join us as well. And I feel like he'll spit the hottest takes out of all three of you.
When we do the NIT bracket breakdown, we can have him on.
Well, I'll do the women's, man. Pete brought up the women's, UConn women's all the way this year. That's my team. All right. That's my real team right there.
Juju Watkins, bro. One woman wrecking crew through the whole tournament. Watch out for Juju.
I think they line up on the same side too, because UConn's the 2. So it's going to be an intent. Assuming they both get there.
I was so impressed with her last year as a true freshman. Yeah. And again, in the women's game, even more players are staying to their senior year, obviously. And she's a true freshman out there, squaring up against the best competition, scoring 30 points. I'm like, this girl is freaking nasty. 6'3", right, or something like that, like handling like a guard. She's nice. I'm a big Juju Watkins fan. All right, Subway Sports Talk. That's all we got. Thank you guys so much for your time and for your takes, and we'll see how we do. Can't wait for Thursday.
Thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
All right, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. People out there, subscribe, rate, review. Hit us on the podcast app, Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Also on socials at Subway Sports Talk for that. Enjoy your Thursday. It's bracket time, baby. Cheers.